Hello, this is Stephen E. Andrews, Outlaw Bookseller, and a quick review today. And I wanted to review a relatively famous book and a book which should be a lot more well known. And one of the best ways to get people's attention onto lesser known books is to focus on a better known book first. And the first book I want to talk about is Robert Silverberg's Dying Inside, here in an Eastern Press leather limited edition. Absolutely beautiful. Lovely smell to them. I'm not normally one of these book smelling people, but full leather does it for me. Gilt edged, and Eastern are kind of like a book club. They're a bit like folio, but this stuff's much nicer, and they do broader things and they're more interesting. And this edition's got a frontispiece by Frank Kelly Freas, which if I can find it, I'll show it to you. There we go. And I'm going to talk about that and a book with a very similar, if not identical theme, but it's equally good in a different way, which is The Journal of Nicholas the American by Leigh Kennedy, a very fine American SF writer I know who lives in Britain and has done for some time. So the theme of both is telepathy, or more specifically teleempathy, because the protagonists of both books can receive people's thoughts and feelings, but not send. Dying Inside, for me, it's one of the big Silverbergs. I'm a huge Silverberg fan, and I have said that I'm going to reread and re-review The World Inside by Robert Silverberg, because Matt at Book Pilt, who's done so much on my channel, said that it's his favourite, and he's keen to know what I think on a second reading. But Dying Inside is undoubtedly one of the best Silverbergs, if not the best one. There's a big four published by Gollancz, which are Dying Inside, The Book of Skulls, Downward to the Earth, and A Time of Changes. I would put all of them in my top 6 or 7 Silverbergs, because obviously his oeuvre is very large. And, you know, I really can't say enough good about them, because Silverberg, a real writer, you know, a real pro stylist, very urbane and sharp and witty and wise. Very good at dealing with this as a transcendence and power, as I've said before in my Silverberg Collections video. The protagonist of Dying Inside is David Selig, a Jewish single man who was born in the 40s. And the novel set, I think, in 1976. It came out about 73, I seem to remember, maybe a bit earlier. And it is a book of its time. It reflects America in that sort of end of the counterculture period as we go into the 70s. And it has a lot of sort of contemporary concerns. It's set in New York. And Selig's a bit of a drifter. He's always had to keep his distance from people because he can feel their emotions and their thoughts. And it's quite a painful process. And he earns a living by doing that exam cheat thing. He will write papers for people and sell them to them so they pass their exams. And there's quite a bit about that in there. And he has strained relationships. And I don't really want to give too much away about this, but it is a process in the book where he's had this power since he was a small boy, and it's gradually waning and he is dying inside. His ability is going, and he has very mixed feelings about it, and it's very beautiful and tender and affecting book. He's very alienated, and his power has made him alienated, and he's becoming very sad about losing it. So it's an interesting take on the sort of theme of the Superman in SF. You know, it started, you know, with things like Slan by A. Van Vogt and Mutant by Henry Kuttner. There is a video on my channel about Mutant, and these things went on to influence stuff like the X-Men. You know, it's all from SF sources, all that sort of thing. So this is a sort of delicate literary take. It's got some anger and some fire in it, and Selig is sort of an anti-hero. But as the introduction says in this, is he's kind of an anti-hero. You know, he's not a bad guy at all, but you know, you do sometimes feel that he's a bit sharp. But he's a typical or typical Silverberg protagonist. You know, as I said, power and transcendence are two of the themes which Silverberg tackles time and time again, reflecting his own success in life, his own ups and downs, which if you read his autobiographical writings become clearer in his fiction what he's getting at. And Dying Inside, I can't really say enough good about it. It's a fantastic book. I'm not going to do too many spoilers. There's some wonderful scenes when he, you know, inadvertently allows somebody to understand what his ability is, but we gradually see it ebbing away. And in lots of ways, it's got a sort of similarity with the end of George R. Stewart's Earth Abides, a very different book, which is a post-apocalyptic novel about the passing of things and acceptance, and it's just very, very, very wise, and I really recommend it. As I say, it is one of Silverberg's big books. It's one of the big four in Gollanc's masterworks. The other one I would say, which I cleave to very strongly, is A Time of Changes, and I'll talk about that again because that had a very profound impact on me when I first read it back in the 80s. And The Book of Skulls is a very clever one as well, because it's a book which has an indeterminate state. It's always been published and marketed as SF. And some people say it's not SF. The original Gollanc's UK hardcover had fantasy on the cover rather than SF. It wasn't a yellow jacket. And the thing with The Book of Skulls is that it's a road novel. And basically it covers four characters who are different collegiate archetypes. There's a small learned Jew. There's a jock, a farm boy. And these different archetypes, they discover that there is a book, a manuscript, which the Jewish guy managed to translate, which tells them of a place in the desert where there's a cult which can guarantee immortality if you undergo a certain ritual. I will talk more about Book of Skulls, but what's clever about it is that it's indeterminate, as I say. At the end of the book, you cannot tell whether it is science fiction, fantasy, or general fiction because of what is withheld. And this is one of the cleverest things in fiction. This is something that somebody like Christopher Priest is really good at, is withholding information, concealing, so that you're uncertain about the reality, and the sort of reality which Philip K. Dick talked about, the ideas cosmos, or the kainos cosmos, where there's the objective reality and the subjective one. The two things don't always mesh. Schrodinger's cat is in the box is sealed, and you don't know until the box is opened and you observe what's happened, whether the cat is living or dead. So at that point, the cat is in a quantum state, it's both alive and dead. And the act of observing what's happened to the cat when you open the box collapses the wave function and reality is revealed. But until that point, the cat is both alive and dead. The Book of Skulls is a bit like that because of what's withheld. So I would say do read Dying Inside and do read the Book of Skulls. As I say, similar to Dying Inside is this book, The Journal of Nicholas the American by Leigh Kennedy. This was published by Jonathan Cape. This has never had a UK paperback edition. There was one in the USA. I think it was shortlisted for the Nebula Award, I seem to recall, and Leigh signed this copy for me way back in 87, 88, and she signed it for me in the bookshop I was working at the time, and luckily we had it on hand, and it was great to get it signed, and she signed a few copies, and I was very proud to sell them. Always disappointed to see there was no paperback ever. And this was her second book. Leigh's from Texas, and she lives in the UK. Just small but very fine output. This was her first book, the collection Faces, which is a wonderful collection of SF, fantastic and mainstream stories. Again, never ever paperbacked in the UK. And there's a story in here called Her Furry Face, which is about a scientist who has a relationship with a female orangutan, and it was quite it was quite a thing at the time, and people were quite sort of, you know, shocked by it, but delighted by it as well. It's very, very bold and frank, and it's a great, great book. So if you ever see these, do pick them up. And Leigh is such a nice person. She's a lovely, lovely woman. And I know she has some unpublished novels too, I believe. She did write a book called Saint Hiroshima, which came out in hardcover. I don't have it to hand. I do have it here somewhere. And that did get a paperback in Abacus. Not a very good cover on the Abacus paperback. And that's a mainstream novel. But The Journal of Nicholas the American, which you should be able to pick up secondhand in paperback, I hope, and I think there's Kindle versions out there, is a really great story about a student who's around the age of about 27. And it's interesting because Selig deals with students in Dying Inside, and he has quite an altercation with a student of colour in this at some point, which some people have said is a very racist moment in the book, but it's not. It represents the sort of rage that a lot of people had post the civil rights era. And the student in this, Kolya, he's of Russian descent, and Nicholas Alexandriev, I think his name is, and he's called Kolya for short. And he, you know, he has this ability as well. It's not so much telepathy as telempathy. He can feel people's emotions, and he does it through drinking vodka. So he drinks vodka a lot. He's at university, as I say. He's in his late 20s. He's taking his time to get a degree because it is really difficult. He's misunderstood, and he's struggling because this power, which he can't control, is hard to switch off. It's a bit like the song Psy Power by Hawkwind. It's a curse rather than a blessing. And he sort of ends up being drawn to a young woman in his class who's called Jack, and he starts a relationship with her. And at the same time, you know, it's very difficult and painful. But then there's a terrible revelation when he realizes that Jack's mother has terminal cancer. And instead of dying inside himself, as Selig does in the Silverberg book, Kolya is experiencing somebody else's passing and pain. And, you know, it's fantastic stuff. You know, this is literature. This is high quality literary SF. These are people who could stand on any stage beside any sort of writers. And as I say, tragically, this never had a paperback. I want to know why there's not a Golax masterwork of this, because there should be, because Leigh's a really good writer, and I think she's an important one. But her career ended relatively soon after her first two books due to sort of lack of attention, really. Some years ago, she produced a limited edition with PS, Wind Angels, with her latest stories. And as I say, she does have 2 unpublished novels. So her work is well worth looking out for. She's a fantastic woman, as I say. She's such a great person. I think everybody who knows her absolutely loves her. And I haven't seen her for 15 years, which is shocking. I really must make the effort. Leigh, I hope you're watching this, and I hope you're well. So that's Dying Inside, which you simply have to read, and The Journal of Nicholas the American by Leigh Kennedy. So this is Outlaw Bookseller, signing out for now. There'll be more Silverberg on the channel, more SF reviews to come. Thanks to everybody for subscribing, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.